Hi, welcome to Eye Openers. I'm your host, Brittany Drozd, and each week I bring you insightful conversations with entrepreneurs that will help you make more money, become a strong leader, and build a business culture that you're proud of. Grab your coffee and let's dive in. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Eye Openers. My name is Brittany Drozd. Of course, you know that, and I am here today with Mark Cromack. Thanks so much for joining me, Mark.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, if you've ever tuned into this before, or for Mark, it might be your first time. We start this off with a cup of coffee usually, or anything that you like to use to help create those eye-opening moments. Now, for me, it takes like a little bit of caffeine to get me rolling and have some of those insights. So what are you drinking?
I am actually drinking coffee, and you know what's interesting? I am new to coffee. It's been about
coffee.
I know it's
right. I'm a fresh convert here, friends.
Not that fresh. It's 5 years, but given how long I've been on the planet, you'd think, why did it take you this long to clue in? The interesting thing is, I'm a newbie, but I'm completely addicted. So, the challenge is, how do you balance out the organic Mexican roast, medium roast, I think is how it's called. They have these things called lattes I just heard about. I'm like, who invented that stuff, and where was I? And I missed the memo. So I'm a little addicted. Let's say that.
Yeah. So what inspired you to pick up your first cup 5 years ago?
A friend of mine was making hers, and she just shared some. And I said, I tried it, and she put this god awful, horrendous coffee creamer that's filled to the gills with sugar. And it was amazing. And it was, 1 part cream, 1 part coffee. And so it's taken me years to unwind from that horrendous, to get to more of a pure experience. But anybody that knows me says it's far from that, given what I put in there now.
Okay. So what is in your coffee? We do go into this.
Organic oat milk, got to go non-dairy. And I have an organic stevia in both powder form and liquid form. And I do kind of a concoction of those 3 things.
Okay. Very
But I'm not doing the latte. However the hell that happens, that's just go to the coffee shop and they do it up. And I'm like, wow, that's about 2 months ago. So I'm a real newbie on that.
Okay. Awesome. I'm like day 3 of having my coffee black.
Oh.
Because I know.
Wow.
But it was recommended to me by my trainer and nutritionist friend here to just cut all that stuff out. I was doing Bulletproof coffee. This might be something interesting for you to look into. But we're just trying this out. So we'll see. That's how much of a loyal coffee drinker I am, that I will drink this coffee black.
If we got off the topic of coffee and all the changes that have happened in my diet, going plant-based and modifying so many things, this is my last corruption that you're not going to take away from me. I mean, I can't do black, and I absolutely love this stuff. And I've given up my burger and my steak by and large. Don't care too much about cheese anymore. So I'm doing okay on all the other aspects, but no, don't touch my coffee.
That's what my friend said to me the other day. I told her, I was like, I'm having my egg whites and my black coffee. And she goes, you will have to pry my latte out of my cold dead hand.
Straight up. I'm with her. She gets my vote.
I can relate to that. But, part of my job is provoking people's thinking and pushing them into a zone of uncomfortability for their own growth and benefit. And I said, I was afraid of what I would feel like without my crutch of my creamer concoction that I do in my coffee. And I thought, gosh, I need to practice what I preach here. And it doesn't have to be forever. And it might not even be tomorrow. But what if I lean into this idea of that, I will die without this creamer? And it's been interesting to just push myself in different ways. And so this is one of those edges I'm just trying out.
Well, good for you. You enjoy that edge. I'm going to stay over here in the safe ship. But you know what's interesting about this, and you can stop getting me going on these things. I would never have said in a million years a year ago, and anybody that knows me, my kids are literally saying, who are you? And the idea of giving up so many things on my path and journey to better health. And so that was really interesting. And so if you'd asked me a year ago, would my diet consist of what it consists of right now? I would have said hell to the no. So what you're doing, I can't see that. I couldn't see where I'm at right now either. So I guess I am adaptable. And that was one of the topics I was going to talk about today.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's jump into that. Why don't I give you a formal introduction here with your bio so people understand why the heck I should be listening to this guy, Mark, in the first place in his late bloomer coffee addiction.
Yes.
So, Mark, you are a veteran in applying technology to consumer and business markets. You have experience that goes beyond technical prowess, though. You have drive and passion that has spearheaded the successful formation of TimeCloud, Riviera Nexus, Koji, Crystal Voice, and QIC. Mm-hmm. And as a former co-founder, CEO, and CTO of Crystal Voice Communications, a leading provider of innovative voice over IP solutions, Mr. Cromack's expertise and hands-on leadership resulted in advanced digital signal processing algorithms that laid the foundation for Crystal Voice's core voice technology.
Indeed.
I did it.
You did. So basically, you could have shortened that up and say, he's a serial geek entrepreneur who likes to play in tech and does speech stuff. He calls it digital signal processing. Ooh, doesn't that sound all fancy?
Yeah.
And ironically,
you know what? You fit the mold of who I love to have here, which are technical experts, technical experts who are making the transition into leadership. And that's why you're here. And we missed out. I know, one of the things that stood out to me is your new work in Gist. And that wasn't on your bio. Tell me real quick.
Gist? Well, what's interesting is that one of the keys in entrepreneurship is being flexible. Because anybody who says, hey, I've raised some money and I've got this idea and I must be smart because somebody gave me some money, watch me go. Dude, there are so many things that are going to change in your outlook on what you're doing. And there's so many mistakes you don't even have a clue on, or things that you never anticipated. So the ability to adapt. And one of the things that was interesting about Gist was we as a team had a very successful creation of our predecessor company, Koji, with, winning awards in our mobile experience and being evaluated as a top app in our space. And yet I wasn't happy with it. And why not? Because a core principle that I go after is if I've recorded something in audio or video, I don't actually want to watch it or listen to it. I want to be able to extract out the gist. So I oftentimes said, oh, this is great. I've captured 20 minutes of something important. Oh, crap. Now I have to listen to or watch 20 minutes of stuff again. And I already lived through it. This is my world of voicemail to now. We had digital sound, we had Koji, we had Gistify, we have Soundly, all of these things in and around speech and speech processing. But at the end of the day, I just want to get right to the point, which I don't always do when I'm asked a question, by the way. So, the
irony.
If people are watching this that know me, they'd be like, oh man, that guy can't shut up. So anyway.
Don't worry. I have a unique ability to steer people back.
Nice.
So this is really interesting. So you've spent really a huge portion of your career in voice, in, communications, in audio, but you had a realization as a consumer. Yep. And for any of you guys who are in this podcasting world, I've been doing video since like 2014. And the amount of times I have to go back and listen to something and try to find, I'm literally, as we talk, making notes right now about where to go back to. Right. Or show notes to save time, because this is something that can eat up hours and hours and hours of, going back through pre-recorded content. And so that's how you got this idea.
I couldn't have had a better softball thrown at me. And as a sports metaphor for the guy that sat on the bench until the ninth inning, suddenly it was his fault that the game was lost because he struck out. Do I have issues going back decades? Anyway, the idea is
work on those later.
I can work on those later. But the thing with Gist was about, can you create a visualization from that raw audio or video content to create visual signposts through our AI technology that very quickly you can scan through the content, in this case, a video podcast, and find you may not find the exact wording because you don't exactly remember what it was, or you may not even remember what it was you're looking for, but you know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But you find this cluster of what we call signposts as you navigate the media in moments to be able to say, oh, there it is. And as you mouse over any of these signposts, which are the key words that are extracted from the audio or video content, you get a contextual transcription hint that says what it is that's going on around that. So hopefully from a cluster of these signposts, you don't even have to listen to the audio or watch the video. You just go, oh, that's what Mark said that I started to write a little Post-it note on. I've got the full context because it was just yesterday. Now I can write that note and I didn't have to spend 15 minutes or an hour pouring through this audio or video.
Mm-hmm.
That's the essence of it. And that's why my previous most awesome solution was still missing that piece, because while I might have captured only a moment of an hour and a half long meeting in these highlights, these cogent moments or these cogent ideas, which is where the name cogent came from. But now I can know exactly what that one note looks like in a very quick, almost, visualize it, understand at a glance what it is that it's about.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I have clients who they pay their assistant or whatever to be in meetings to literally like take notes and form the task list, from the meeting. But it sounds like that we could just use the software.
You could, but it's even worse than that. Now you have to make sure that your assistant knows exactly what you feel is relevant. You need to make sure that he gets the idea that, Brittany thinks that this is something she needs to remember. And that may not always be the case. I always liken it to the fact that these automatic note-taking systems are so omniscient that we can walk into a meeting and you've got head of tech, you've got the marketing person, you've got the ops person, and they all come in with different needs into that particular meeting. Right. Well, how can any system know a priori what in fact is essential for each of those different cohorts that walk into that particular meeting? And so instead, what we like to think of is, let's give you a map. Like this is Google Maps for rich media content. This is the ability to traverse that audio or video content and find that salient point in a moment and maybe not even play it. That to me is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I'm going to make sure that we're going to capture the gist of that conversation and get it in the notes for those of you who feel like too long didn't listen. And
right.
We will make sure that you can connect to get that running up and running for you guys as soon as possible. So let's dive into some of the things, because I want people to get an understanding of who you are, how you got here, and what are those skills that continue to be part of your success. So how long have you been at this entrepreneurial game?
That's a good one. I think 1997.
Okay.
How's that for dating me?
Well, the last person I just was talking to is at his 30-year anniversary.
There you go.
Creating. So you're right in good company here. And what I love about having serial and veteran entrepreneurs on the show is that there is really this depth of like wisdom and experience that allows you to kind of get off of that roller coaster, so to speak, that is the peaks and the valleys, like of what it means to be or what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. And I'm just shy of 10 years in. So I feel like I still have that, but I am experienced enough now to be aware of it. But so much of the audience is still kind of on those peaks and valleys, ups and downs. And why I love having you guys on the show is that you've been through that and you're maybe even just a few steps beyond it. And that is everything to someone who's in it, who's like in the depths, who's in the valley, like the low part, and thinking, gosh, why the heck do I do this? I want to give it all up and just go get a job.
Right.
Tell us like what it's maybe one of those key moments for you where either it felt like it wasn't working out, but you made it through.
That's interesting because with our last project that's still actually ongoing, there was a point at which we were all looking at, you're in the middle of the 2009 recession.
Oh, wow.
Now, funding is drying up.
Yeah.
You've got this product, but you've got to get it into market. The mobile app experience is starting to explode. Well, now you need $1 million to port your software, create an app experience. And so while you're doing that, there's I don't know if it's an arrogance or a tenacity, but I have 3 more great ideas and I know where this can go. And so I'm going to stay the course and figure it out some way, somehow. And that was how Gist was born out. It was that I know there's something more. I'm still thinking of that core vision. And I don't know if I want to call that a pivot or an evolution of a product, but there was a problem where I was so dissatisfied. And to be honest, I also had, millions of dollars of other people's money invested in the concept. And I wasn't willing to walk away from that investment for me personally or from them because it got tough. And it got really tough. It was like, you ask yourself that question, the exact one you just presented. Should I go get a real job instead of an entrepreneurial job? But then, you have a conversation. In this case, it was with my daughter, and we're going through the, what's going on. And there was this epiphany, not in that particular meeting. That came from our meeting discussion, and I have meetings with my daughter. But anyways, because this concept of this problem that I'd literally been marinating on for 8 years. And when I say I mean me. It was like I wasn't having group meetings on this. It was like, I love our product, but it's missing. I love our product, but there's something still substantially wrong with it. How can I, as I presented at the beginning of this, solve the problem of never listening to the audio or video that I record? Think about that as a problem statement. It's kind of silly in a way. It's like, well, why do you record it? Well, what is the value of the last Zoom recording that you made if you weren't doing a podcast from it? If you were in a regular meeting, it was an hour and a half, and there might have been 2 really salient moments in an hour and a half. You're not going to listen to or watch your Zoom recording. It's click, move it over. Nope, that's not it. You bounce the little cursor across. And by the time you've done it, you've burned 30 minutes and you've got nothing and you're frustrated. That was my problem statement. And I'd continued to think about this. People say, oh, well, you could just get a transcript. 15,000 words per audio hour. Think about that. Your podcast will have today over 10,000 words spoken by Mark. My apologies to anyone listening. I'm so sorry. That's an awful lot of Mark. I get it. So how can we reduce the Mark quotient so you're not listening to that much audio? How about none? How about, can I just use the experience? And when I finally kind of crystallized on a visualization that made sense to me and something that I understood from my technical background we could produce, then I started to bring in others.
So for you, part of your process looks like you've got to marinate on something for a while and think it through before you share.
It depends. Typically not. I'm typically like clicking on the join me on Slack every 5 minutes, and people are like, somebody gave me an idea, and it's like, he just said this last week. I've got to remember that anytime I throw something on Slack to Mark, I should be prepared for 45-minute follow-on on a Zoom call. But on the bigger things, the visionary things, the core pivots, or things that become core pivots in your business, you have to be open to what's going well and could be better, or what's just absolutely sucking.
So explain to us how you learned that flexibility, that adaptability that you feel has been really like pivotal to or paramount to your success as an entrepreneur and as a serial entrepreneur. So what were those moments, like that 2009 moment where funding's drying up and you're like, oh, okay, what do we do now? Like, how did you, is that where you learned how to be flexible and adaptable? And how did you learn that?
No, that was more just the situation so dynamically and so rapidly changed that, I give serious props to those that were able to identify and make preemptive changes to their business. Would have been great to have appropriately sized the company earlier than we did when we were forced to, instead of could have been proactive. There's a lot of did well and do better. Postmortems are quite useful.
Totally.
I'd say a better example would be the recognition of value. We had in my prior to that company in the early 2000s, we had a hardware platform, we had customers, we had revenue, we had a huge amount of inventory in terms of capital expenditures. But there was a nugget of technology. It was this DSP stuff I was talking about. It was a way of making Skype actually work back in the day when it was on dial-up and it was pretty stodgy. You didn't have the kind of internet connectivity that we have today.
Right.
So the ability to, and the company was called Crystal Voice. The whole thing was centered on making the voice sound awesome. And so we recognized that we had this small amount of software that was the core element on this entire platform. To go from a hardware platform to a software technology play was a big decision that the board had to really marinate on for a bit when I proposed it. But I said, this is where it can go. And that was what eventually sold in 2007, was the technology. It was born out of that really small piece of software that one of my engineers and I envisioned and then implemented, and was subsequently the essence of our patent application for that particular company.
Wow.
So it's really just identifying, it's keeping your eyes open about what's working and what's not, and not living in the echo chamber of that, I know better about what my customers want or this. It's really taking a hard look at what do you actually know.
So you bring up a really great point, right? Because when you get far enough along, you might start to feel like, well, maybe I do know a lot, or I do know what people need, because look at the success my organization is having, and people can get really kind of stuck in that tunnel vision or that silo, right? Of like, no, we're just going to keep going along. But what you probably know after decades of doing this, and what I feel like I already know is that things are forever changing. Like, if you didn't learn that in the last 2 years,
yeah, no kidding.
I don't know what that was for. But if you lived through that in your business,
right?
The number one lesson here is that things are going to happen that we can't foresee and predict. And the best thing we can do is be nimble, be willing to adjust and lean into what the market is showing us. So how do you either shape your company or exercises or something that keeps you guys in tune with what your customers are wanting and needing and saying?
Well, I think that's an area that even with these successes and failures that I've experienced, there's still a diligence required to keep not listening to the echo chamber of, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And oh, that's a problem statement. You just said, oh, I don't want to do that. You're validating my premise. But one of the challenges is, okay, now I'm going to ask you to do something in order to affect change in your life by adopting this new technology and the technology that we're pushing forward. And you're like, well, I'm busy. I don't quite have time to do that. It sounds great in principle, but is there that compelling drive that says, oh, I have to do this? And so it's still a challenge. And so we still have to keep asking and keep trying and getting it out there. So I don't know that there's any magic bullet other than listen. And that's, for people that know me, it's an area for personal growth that may never, ever, ever truly be solved. But I'll give you one example on Gist. I was so set on this is so cool that I had numerous people telling me, Mark, this is really a big deal. And where else it can be applicable is here. Yeah. But look at what I've got here. And I mean, there must have been, and I do not remember the other guy's name. I should figure that out. But one of my business partners, Steve, had indicated a key niche that is, in his opinion, being an area expert in his space, which don't you want an area expert who understands what it is you do and says, this is going to be bigger than any of the other market segments that you think you're going after for the Justify solution. And I'm like, whoa, oh, okay, that sounds cool. And it took like 4 or 5 or 6 instances of this kind of interaction for me to actually listen to. There was something beyond my core. I already got all the validation I needed in this one space that I needed, but suddenly there was the broadening of it, and it really expanded my vision. And that was 3 years ago. That wasn't like 20 years ago. So I think you're still adapting and listening and trying to fight the echo chamber of your fans who keep saying, oh my gosh, this is a big deal. Or the guy in the mirror that's saying, yeah, you got it, bud.
Yeah. You're right. And I think that probably gets more challenging the further along you get, right? Because, you are much more of an expert in some ways now than you were 20, 25 years ago. Yet it takes a level of humility to tune in and say, no, like, we might be missing something here. I need to keep tuning in and listening to these customers.
I really think that the market validation piece is something that I as a technologist need to constantly, almost daily, remind myself that it's really critical to, get your product out. One expert talked about, based on his extensive portfolio success. And when I see somebody who's repeated this thing, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and he's had 3 failures that were massive failures and then massive success. And he's like, you're always wanting to polish the stone and always, but they need this and they need this. He's like, get it out there, get them to use it, ask them to use it, do whatever you need to do, and then listen and roll that back in. And I'm still by no means an expert in that realm. That's always a work in progress. And that's the area I look to augment my team, which I've done even recently, bringing in a key resource that's just really bolstering the team demonstrably in terms of messaging. I'll share with you a recent comment by my son. Dad, you write like a robot.
Yeah.
That kind of hurt, right? It was grammatically accurate, but I guess I write like a robot. So it was taking that feedback and finding out where your strengths lie and getting those around you to, it's cliche, but it's, you want to synergize with your team and you want to get people that can augment and cover for your shortcomings.
It's true. So let's segue into that point. One of the most challenging parts of entrepreneurship I've seen people experience is going from the thing that really got you to this next growth point,
yes,
which is being that technical expert, being excellent at the thing that you do.
Right.
And then as your business grows, you need to bring more people in, and then you need to actually become a master leader or manager and delegate and bring other people, kind of develop them up to that level. And that is a totally different skill set. Can you tell us about how you made that transition, or if you're still in it, what's working, what hasn't worked for you?
Well, I think I think there's an aspect of pride of ownership that's always critical. And I don't think any team member wants, anybody that's worth their salt should be proud of the work that they do, but they also need to be listened and heard. And I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years about, the supervisor, manager, whomever, who's just delegating everything in this way. This is how it's got to be. If you bring them in and you understand what value they bring, it's okay to not be the one that has all the answers. And so maybe that goes back to the humility part, but let's take in fact, my most recent hire, Kevin. We've worked together for 10 years and he's amazing. And his way of handling me is, it's okay, Mark, tomorrow you'll figure this out and we'll talk. So the next day we get on Zoom. A few expletives later, he is literally just howling as I'm owning the fact that, yes, he was right, because he gets me to think. And the only reason I'm thinking about it is I'm going, I actually trust. I mean, I remember distinctly this one interaction where we were at odds, not in any kind of confrontational way, but I'm like, no, Kevin, you need to understand that this, I'm adamant about this point. This is the way it's got to be. And he's listening patiently. He's super chill and he's listening and he's just a little bit of not a smirk, but a smile. And then he tells me how it should be. And I'm like, that's going against the grain of what my gut feels. And I talk about gut a lot when I talk to people about trust your gut and trust when to let your gut grow. And I've been burned on both sides where my gut said, don't do this. We went this and we were burned. I've also realized when my gut was saying one thing and I had to trust because it was out of my area of expertise. And I think that allows for the development of good synergy, for pride of ownership by the team member who's contributing. And for Pete's sakes, it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, why are we doing this? I don't care how important it is to the shareholders or to any of these other things. If you can't have fun doing it, what's the point? We should all have a little bit of joy in our day besides this awesome coffee. Thank you very much. Going back.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So I'm trying to think about how do I want to shape that question, but it sounds like you focus on bringing people in. So hiring people that have the confidence really to challenge you or present ideas that might be different than what you believe initially or whatever. Like, so you're hiring people who are experienced enough or to trust their own gut, to go against maybe what is being said.
I'd like to think of it differently. I'd like to think that was close, but I want them to have confidence in what they do and know. But I want to set an environment up that even the loud tech guru with a lot of energy is approachable. Early in my career, I was 22. I remember, it was right out of college. And this woman who handled the filing of content that I would produce, we got on a personal conversation at one point. She said she was literally terrified anytime she had to interact with me. And I was like, whoa, I'm just this punk out of college, But there was a stack of, this is old school. So there was a stack of paper this big. And if she messed up one piece of paper, the physical electronic computer board would not be manufactured correctly. And it was really critical. And so when I said it with all my enthusiasm, it's really critical you get this. You can't fudge it up. She was so terrified. And only through getting to know me over time did she realize, oh, he cares about getting it done correctly, but he's, high strung or whatever the issue was, but he's chill and he's not going to bite my head off. But I took that to heart. This is decades later. And so you need to create an environment where they know all ideas are discussed. And I haven't got a problem being wrong. And I go against that gut sometimes, and it's burned me too. So it's still a tricky thing to know all my experience. But if I'm bringing somebody in with a wealth of experience outside of my area, then I have to, really be conscious of when I push back. There was one exception. My vice president of engineering at Crystal Voice, she literally never made a mistake in like the 10 years we worked closely together. So if we ever disagreed, I just assumed I was wrong. And it made for no possible chances of any mistakes because she just literally never got it wrong. And so I was like, dang, really? And she would go, yeah. And I go, okay, I'll figure it out later. So, and that was on technical stuff. Forget about all this marketing and messaging stuff. So there you go. So maybe it's just a matter of creating an environment that people feel comfortable to push new ideas, because otherwise, you're limited by what I know and what I don't know and my assumptions. And that doesn't always end well.
Right. And so if there is that person who never gets it wrong and is kind of like perfectionist, that's not a super safe environment for people to try new things or take risks.
It's no fun either. And our axiom here, our thesis has got to be, let's have some fun where we make some really cool tech.
Yeah. So how did you manage that, right? As like the leader, the entrepreneur, like what did you do to manage the cultural impact of this non-mistake maker?
Oh no, she was chill. It wasn't in confrontational. She was smiling. That was not a confrontational environment. It was literally just because I recognized on a technical side that her attention to detail was so on point that she wouldn't miss these things that I would miss. And so in most cases, I wouldn't miss them. And this was a really unique experience for me to just recognize. And it was really, it was admiration on my part to recognize that I must just simply be wrong. But it's creating an environment that allows other people to do it. So that was not, I don't think there's a place
for the delegation and her value. And I got it.
Yeah. The prima donna that's completely right all the time when he comes in, and they don't last long in any organization. And we call the herd in that context.
Okay. So we've been talking, we've been reflecting on what got you here and what things have, helped you be successful. Let's talk more future oriented. So if you and I were to speak 3 years from now and we said, oh, my old friend, Brittany, thank you so much for calling.
Where you been? Where's the coffee? Hello. It's post-COVID. We're allowed to actually meet in person at a coffee shop.
That's right.
Toast.
I want to know what would you have accomplished that you'd be excited to tell me about? What's your vision?
Well, from a business perspective, there's two areas that we're really excited about. And one is to get the Justified solutions integrated into a lot of platforms. We've got security, education, legal, collaboration. There's lots of platforms. And so it'd be great to be able to look back on this and see, a really substantial premise. You may not hear the word Justify, but I want to see the Justified experience built into other platforms. We're also incubating another company on top of everything we've been doing that will actually be integrating the GIST technology into it as part of its solution into the space. So it'd be great to see that actually in market, because it's just a concept right now on paper. There's no software. There's just, there's a PowerPoint presentation and a lot of notes and a lot of energy around it. So let's see if that comes to fruition.
Well, what's the what do you want to go after that feels impossible right now?
Well, you can't be an entrepreneur and think anything's impossible. So I reject the premise.
Okay. I appreciate that.
But, I think I go back to one of your other things, which, you talked about the exhaustion factor when you're in those lows. The highs are great and the lows are like, but often, and not even making a joke about coffee, a good night's sleep and a bit of coffee, and you wake up and you got to be able to have your battle cry ready and decide what are the things that you're going to go after today to to make small, changes to move things forward. I liken it to a friend of mine who said, you've got a spoon or maybe 2 spoons and you're moving a mountain an inch to the right. It's a lot of work. And so you just, chip away at it until it becomes more manageable, at least in vision.
Wow. What a great visualization. Yeah. I think it's like even beyond exhaustion, it can feel like defeating in some of those moments,
Absolutely.
right? And like when you realize my tool is this spoon and I have this huge mountain to move. So, Mark, I'm so grateful for you showing up today because you have this just depth of expertise in technology, and not all of my guests do. So it's really fun to like watch your brain work and see how you move through things. But one thing that was really eye-opening for me is how in touch you stay, even after decades of experience and of creating and of, successful exits and new products, that you still stay so in touch with your customer and what they're looking for in the market. So
Right.
You don't just say like, oh, I've been doing this for years, I know what works, whatever, but you stay so attuned to that metric. And I really, really appreciate that. And I hope that that was eye-opening too for people listening in to this episode, that it doesn't matter how far along you are, or how right you think you are, or how much of an expert you think you are, the market is going to show you, but only if you're paying attention to it. And that's going to help drive your success. So
well put.
Thanks for that point. Yeah. And we are going to highlight, if you're watching this now, you're going to see the show notes below that are going to highlight the main gists or takeaways, or eye-opening moments, as I like to put it,
There you go.
of this episode. Now, Mark, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to reach out or have questions or want to get involved with your software?
Absolutely. You can check out my profile on LinkedIn, of course, like everyone else. If you want to email me directly, hit me up at mark@justify.ai.
Cool. Thanks again for showing up. Thanks again for sharing and being candid. And most of all, for our audience for tuning in and listening. We love to create these moments of insight for you, but for you to use in your business so that you can create the success too. And until next time, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for joining us this week on Eye Openers. Make sure to visit BrittanyDrose.com/podcast for this week's show notes. And if you found value in today's episode, I would so appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. This all helps to support the show.